Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and thank you very much for joining me. My name is Richard from the Seneca team, and today we're going to be looking at how to use Seneca as a head of department, how to set that up, and some useful tips and tools to sort of help you go with that. Towards the end of the session, we'll have a chance to come back and answer any questions that you might have. So do feel free to start popping them in the chat as and when they come up. If you aren't familiar with Zoom, I imagine a lot of you are now, given how much we've been using it over the last few months. If you're not familiar with it, just hover your mouse over my face and you'll be able to click chat at the bottom of your screen. And then if you just start to type in there, and just get questions coming in as and when. Don't feel like you have to wait for a certain time to ask questions. So the way this session is going to run is I'm going to run through just a bit of background on what Seneca is for those who aren't familiar. So just to make sure everyone's on the sort of same footing. And then we're going to look at sort of practical tips and advice on what you can do and the different features that we have within Seneca to help you as a head of department to get it set up in your department, how you can sort of track data, how you can see stuff across different classes, how you can share work with teachers, how you can cover teachers, all that sort of stuff that you might be wanting to think about as a head of department. I'll show you how it works within the platform, so you can get a good grounding to go away and start using it in that way if you have not already doing so. So if I share my screen with you now, as I say, do keep the questions coming in as and when in the chat, okay? So to start off with what Seneca is, and just to, as I say, to get us all off on the right foot so we all understand where we're starting from, is Seneca is a homework and a distance learning platform. So increasingly, obviously, the distance learning is becoming much more of a thing. Previously, the schools would use this as sort of a homework and revision or in-class tool, but now, given lockdowns are happening, there's potentially more on the way. Obviously, in the past, before the summer holidays, there were whole school closures across the country. So schools were using us basically as a way to deliver content to students from a distance, and also to assess those students to see how they're progressing. And some of the best things that I think are worth mentioning, first of all, are that firstly, the way Seneca has been designed is based on cognitive science. So what's been shown to be effective in learning is automatically baked into the platform. You don't need to worry about whether the students in your classes are using Seneca in a way that is effective, because it's impossible to use a Seneca in a way that's ineffective, unless I guess you're just sat there not using it. But if you're using it, the strategies from cognitive science are already sort of happening. They already take into account what the student needs to do. Secondly, is that everything on there is automated, so I know that there'll be a lot of pressure on you and also your colleagues in your department to make sure that there is a time-saving cost in this, given we're all trying to learn new ways of working at the moment. This is one of the things that teachers found really powerful, is that actually everything on there is automated for marking and also for tracking of progress. Now that is obviously useful for your colleagues' perspective and your perspective as class teachers, but from the tracking perspective, I'll show you in a minute, but everything is basically nicely presented for you to basically identify and help your teachers identify where there needs to be interventions in place, but also put in place, but also easy ways to set that intervention up. So it's again, differentiated ways that you can use the technology to deliver differentiated content based on what students do and don't know. Fourthly, from like a student experience, it's adaptive. So what that means is, again, thinking about automation and how we can use the technology to make sure it's the learning is as effective as possible, is that the work is differentiated automatically for your students. So based on how they start to answer questions as they're going through a course, we'll be able to tailor the content automatically for your students, so it will deliver the content that's appropriate and right for them at that moment. And lastly, everything I'm going to show you on this platform, on this webinar, is free to use. There's no cost to any of this. So again, I imagine your department budgets will be tighter than ever at the moment, and you're trying to sort of keep hold of the pennies where possible. So you don't need to worry about dipping into any pots of money to access any of this stuff. Now, we obviously wanted to make sure that, obviously all the time saving and all that stuff is obviously good, but we obviously wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, what we're doing is effective for students. If it's not effective for students, no point doing what we're doing. So we did a randomized control trial with just over 1,100 pupils. And what we found was when we compared it, Seneca, to other independent learning tools like revision guides, as an example, we saw very similar pre-test results in the sample of students. And you can see in the post-test results, the students did over twice as well using Seneca compared to revision guides. So we see that as validation that actually what we're doing is effective, and sort of the science that we've embedded within the platform is an effective implementation of that science. Now, that research was peer reviewed and published. If you'd like to read about it, you can go to any of these journals. And if you just do a quick Google search, you'll find it. But otherwise, if you have any questions, obviously do feel free to ask as well. Now, in terms of what we have on Seneca, in terms of content, for those of you who are secondary school teachers, we cover all year groups of secondary and Key Stage 2 and primary. And everything is either linked to the national curriculum or to the specific exam boards. So the content we deliver is basically everything on the national curriculum for that subject, or everything in the exam board spec for that subject. So you can be confident that whatever your students are studying, that it is what's right for them, it's what they need to know for their exams. And currently we've got just over 3.75 million students using us, about 190,000 teachers, sorry, and over 40,000 parents. There's lots of people using us. We're really pleased to be able to help, especially given that it's been difficult over the last few months, and I think it will continue to be difficult for everyone moving forward. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to show you some more practical ideas and ways you can set up Seneca for your departments now by just going straight into the platform. So for those of you who are familiar with Seneca, you'll recognize this as one of the classes that you have. So the way an individual teacher uses a class, you can just go in, and when you first log in, you get this screen. And then when you're ready, you just have all these classes lined up here. I won't go through the process of creating a class, but it's very straightforward. You just click this button and then follow the steps, basically. But in terms of thinking about department level, imagine at the moment I am an individual class teacher. I don't have any responsibilities for oversight over a department or anything like that. I can see lots and lots of data for my students. Actually, I'm just going to this one. So I can see lots and lots of data for my students. I can set assignments for them to complete work. I can track progress on those assignments. Let me just find an assignment with some data in it. There we go. So yeah, I can track progress of those assignments, so I can see how well my students have and haven't done. Give it a second to load. There you go. So I can see this as, yeah, I can see how well my students have done. I can see whether they've completed assignments, and I can see the different metrics. So at the moment, I've got their best score, but as a teacher, I can also choose worst score, and the data all changes. Same with most recent attempts, same with average score, same with the number of attempts or the total study time. I can see all of that, those bits of data, just by selecting these different options. But at the moment, you as a class teacher, this data at this very moment is only available to the class teacher, which has obviously got value to the class teacher, but there is a missing link with actually having that understanding and sort of breaking that sort of the isolation of the data. Actually, it's much better if we're able to share it with colleagues, so that people know what's going on across the department. So what you can do for that is, if you go back to the overview of the class, as a class teacher, you now have the option to add teachers to that class. Now, this is useful, obviously, if you're sharing the teaching of a class, but also it's useful to add heads of department and other teachers that may be interested in having oversight over that data as well. So if I was to add a teacher, this is, say, one of your class teachers saying, okay, I want to share this with my head of department. What they'd do is they'd put your email address in here, and they'd send you an invitation. And once that's done, you'll get an email that will basically say, teacher X wants you to have access to their class. Do you want to accept? And as soon as you've accepted that invitation, you can then see all the same data that your class teachers can. You can set all the same assignments if you want to set assignments because your colleagues are away. You can do that all from your own account. You basically have almost exactly the same permissions on what the first class teacher who set up the class has. So in terms of setting assignments and viewing insights are like more data, which I'll show you now. So for a specific course, you can go in here, you can select a specific metric and a specific time frame for this. So again, I can go in here and I can select the different sections that I want to see data for. So this is me saying, I'm a geography head of department. I want to see data for types of hazards, whatever it is. So I can see all this data. I can come in here and see it for a specific class. So it's not just the class teacher who is having access to this data, it's you as your head of department as well. So now I can see all this data, as you see, nicely presented in red, amber, green. You can also identify where there are specific difficulties as well. So say you want to see specific difficulties with this consequences section, you can just click on it and it sorts it from worst to best. And if you click it again, it just sorts from best to worst in terms of their results within this time period. So it really quickly enables you to access the data and see what's going on across different classes. Now, anywhere that there is data on Seneca, and again, this is further helping to make most effective use of the data that we have, is you can download CSV files. And what that will do is it will download a spreadsheet, then you can use to centralize anything you want. You can use it to upload it to your MISs if you want. You can use it to link into your Google Classroom or whatever it is that you use in your school. So again, that's further opportunity for you to download and access more and more data. Now you can also see just general overview. So if you want to just understand how the students across your department are accessing the work and how, if they're actually accessing the work, how well they're doing on a general basis, you can use this students tab in each class. That gives you stats like learning time, average score, sessions completed, and the number of correct answers across a course. So it will give you a lot of access to a lot of data and available there ready to use. Now I talked a bit about interventions earlier. Now, of course, you can use this data that we provide you to think about what interventions you want to put in place. Say, for example, for Leah, she needs some support here or these 3 topics. And you can obviously do that independently, do something outside of Seneca if that's what you want to do. However, we do offer you the option to automatically add interventions within Seneca. So to do that, what you can do is go to an assignment. And if I click on one of the assignments, say this one, so I've got lots of data loading up here. And what you can see is I've got lots of data from students. Some of them have done really well. A lot of them in this case, it looks like. Some of them have done not so well or are just slightly below target. So if they go below 80%, it goes amber, and anything below 50% is red. But what you can do is automatically reset the work for your students based on how well they've done in these assignments. And for that, you can use the Smart Reassign function. So if I just click on this Smart Reassign at the top here, the class teacher or you at this point, once you've been given access to the class, can choose to reassign this work for particular students based on how well they've done in the assignment. So say I want to reset the work for everyone who didn't complete it and everyone who got any sections less than 80%. I can reassign that to my students. I can then give it a name for that session. This assignment, I can give it a start and an end date. So I can set it to go forward into the future if I want. So something quite nice to do is if your students have done not particularly well on a particular topic, either reset it for them to have a look at it immediately or reset it for them to visit in a couple of weeks' time. so then they're re-accessing the work and reminding themselves. Now, when students come to revisit this work, it won't be exactly the same topic or the same course that they see, because I remember I talked about the adaptiveness of Seneca earlier. So the session will adapt to the individual depending on what they did last time, how long it's been since they've studied it before, and lots of other bits of data that we use to sort of personalize the learning experience. When you're ready, you just click Reassign, and that will automatically reassign the work for anybody who got less than 80% in a session. You can see it links up with Teams, Classroom, email if you want to. But if you just use something like Show My Homework or another platform, you can also just copy the invite link using this button here. What you'll see is I've got here just a select few students that I have met the criteria I set for the intervention that I wanted them to have. And you can see here we've either got NS for not set or NA for not yet complete. So you can see exactly what your students have been set in the intervention. And you saw it just took me, what, a few clicks, and it took me through to the to reset that work for my students. So that's from like a head of department perspective of how you can get set up. I've not talked specifically about how you set up classes or anything like that, but if there are any questions about that, obviously do put that in the chat if anyone's unsure about that, because I'm happy to talk about that. But I'm trying to focus mostly on what, as a head of department, you might need to access data, to set work for your students, things like that. So the other thing I think is worth talking about is, I don't know if any of you use Teams, but if you do, there is one particularly nice feature that I think is worth mentioning, that is a really good way to help students and staff gain access to the right tools you want them to. So what you may notice is within Teams, you may need, depending on your permissions, you may need to talk to your IT technicians in school about setting this up, but it's very easy to do if you do have the right permissions. Is within a channel in Teams, you can add a custom page here. So these three are there as standard. But what you can do is you can add a custom link. And there's lots of third-party products that you can add in as these extra on your Teams to sort of keep everything within Teams, and also things like Microsoft Word, OneNote, PowerPoint, all that other stuff that you would get normally with Microsoft. You can add it straight into Teams, so it's an easy place to find. But you can also add different websites. So what you can do is set up a website that is just a Seneca tab, and you can add in this https://app.senecalearning.com. And then when you save that, what that does is it just creates another tab that you and your colleagues and your students can access from their Teams channel. And you'll see that it then just keeps it all in one place, which is quite nice and quite handy. So you can see here, as a teacher, I've got this class here, but if I was logged into a student account, it would just take me through to the student account. So it's quite nice to keep it all in one place, keep it handy, and get it set up nice and easily. The other thing that I imagine a lot of your colleagues in your department struggle with is parental engagement. So again, we have worked a lot on trying to make this process as simple as easy as possible for all teachers, but also for heads of department. I think this is particularly valuable potentially in terms of not requiring your staff to have lots and lots of overhead, lots of resource in contacting parents. You can actually set up automatic parent updates through the parent accounts we have. So these allow parents to just go and create a free account, connect their accounts to their children's accounts, and then as they complete work through the assignments and the work that you set through school, the parents will get an update on what is going on across, what is going on for their child here. This is really good because it obviously involves the parent in the child's education a lot more, which, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of research suggesting that's a very, it's a massive differentiator in terms of increasing student outcomes, is the parental engagement. So that's there and available to use. And if you want some resources on how to do that and how to set that up in the school, I'll send them out to you afterwards. Okay, so that's all I basically wanted to talk to you and show you about in terms of how to set it up from a head of department's perspective. Are there any, if there are any questions that anyone has on anything I've talked about, if you can start to put them in the chat now, and I'll just come back and have a look to see if there are any questions from people. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions, which is great. Either I've explained myself very well, or I've bored you on this Tuesday evening. But if there are any questions, do get them in. But otherwise, if not, okay, great. Well, thank you. So if you, and as I say, I've not gone into a lot of detail on how to set it up from an individual teacher's perspective. I've focused entirely on, from the head of department's perspective, what you can do to help make your colleagues' lives easier, to make your life easier, to access all the data that you need, so that you can then go forward and use this as effectively as possible. If you need any support, you'll get an email from me after this webinar that will basically explain or show you some key resources that will help you get to grips with getting started with this stuff and setting it up. There's also, I'll send out a video from me talking about all the processes, just in case you need to have a refresher of what I talked about today. If you also want to share this with any colleagues, this webinar has been streamed on YouTube. So if you want to access that, just go onto our Seneca CPD YouTube channel and you'll be able to find this exact link. So you can use that, so you can rewatch this or share it with colleagues later. Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great evening.